Welcome to Community Voices with your host, Terrence Lachey. This radio roundtable features community, business, and religious leaders that discuss current events and topics that impact our urban community. If you would like to be a guest or if you have a suggested topic, contact the station today at 616-259-7342. Now, into the program.
Welcome back to Community Voices. I'm Terrence Lachey, and you are tuned in to 91.9 FM, The People's Choice. We have the privilege today to talk about something near and dear to all of our hearts, and that's money, finances, and money. And I have the Good Life Money Coach in the building, Miss Barbara Welch. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Terrence.
Having you back, because you've been here before, right?
Yes, for having me back. It's nice to be here on your show, and thanks to Power 91.5.
Yeah, 91.9.
91.9.
Yeah, 91.9.
Let me correct myself.
Well, you get to dialing down, you'll hear it. It's good gospel music. But I'm privileged to be able to talk to you. I talked to your husband about a month or so ago, or a couple of months ago, and had a chance to talk about his book and his project. But now, privileged to be able to share with you all the Good Life Money Mindset 8 Principles for Living the Good Life Now by Barbara Welch, and well qualified and very well put together. But you've got something exciting that's coming up that we'll talk about. Okay. And then, of course, you always have these nuggets and these tips for living the good life now. That's what's important is now. I always take words and break them down into acronyms or acrostics. And now for me is new opportunities waiting. That's what now means.
I like that.
Yeah, you can use that.
Okay.
As long as you quote me.
I don't mind, Yeah, I might have to pull some other quotes out of some of your other books.
Hey, I have no problem
with that. You have
with
some
that.
great stuff.
Thank you so much. Tell us about what's happening. You got a South Africa tour coming up. Your LinkedIn page is just impeccable as far as watching this grow. I remember when you were thinking of this, and now you have released the workbook and working on the actual manual itself, or the text itself, the book itself. Talk to us about it.
Yes. So, I'm real excited about the book tour.
Okay.
And it's an opportunity for me to be able to share this message and make an impact on the people there in Africa. The way I look at it, Scott and I are just so fortunate to have been able to travel to South Africa and Namibia for years now, and have built some wonderful relationships, met some wonderful people. So whenever we're there, we have had an opportunity to speak to people and, share our gifts and make an impact. And I am just so excited to be able to get back there in this capacity to share these principles, because regardless of where we live in the world, people get up, in the preface of my new book, which is will accompany the workbook. Sure. I introduced a framework that just goes into more detail and offers a process, illustrates the process that I talk about in the workbook. Sure. But it introduces a lot of the stories and the impetus for the book, which was our business failure. But in that preface, I talk about how I feel as we fly into Africa when we are approaching.
Well, I'm sure it's very, 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 very surreal.
It is. It is surreal, and it has become very familiar. Yeah. And, I talk about how from a distance, you can't see the people, but you see the city, right? And that view. So that from that view, it looks like any other cities in the world. So people are, you see the city centers, right? You see the city centers, you see the neighborhoods, you see industry. And as you get closer, as you are getting closer, you start seeing movement and you see the people. But then once you land, now you're with the people. And these people are at work. Yeah. They're earning a living for their families, for themselves, to be able to pursue their dreams and their interests. And we all share that in common. And I think what's so special about going to South Africa and Namibia and even other major countries of the world, we share, most of those countries, we share their democratic governments.
Sure.
And so a lot of our financial systems are very similar.
Yeah.
And so the principles really,
and the American
they
dollar,
translate.
and the American dollar definitely
It's
still
very,
has it
yes,
strong.
it's very powerful.
Yeah, it has an impact. So that's really your expertise is the American dollar, and you can take that and use it elsewhere. I want to go back to something you said. I love the picture. Thank you for giving us that imagery of landing or flying to Africa, and then as you begin to descend to various levels before hitting the ground, you can take in a whole lot. I said surreal because you think about being, Black in America. We've seen a lot of misprivilege, or we've seen a lot of disparity. We've seen a lot of poverty.
Yes.
Pretty much historically, Black folks aren't very wealthy in America. However, when we take our gifts, our talents, our treasures, and we use them tactfully, we can bless the whole world. And you and Scott have both done that. I just want to send a shout out to Scott because,
thank you.
Just the work that he does in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and empowerment space is complemented by what you're doing and helping people with money. Let's talk about that.
And we kind of have merged,
Really? Combine the two?
Well, I mean, in the sense of some of the things that Scott's interested in now. He's part of the investment fund here, in the States. That's specific to West Michigan. And then we also, he is also working on another fund that's specific to Africa. Okay. So
you are definitely multidimensional people.
Yeah, but I think it just kind of all stems from the same giftings, and very similar.
I can relate.
I think you can certainly relate to that.
And y'all got 29 years of marriage.
31 in September.
Wow.
So it will actually be celebrating
in Namibia.
Yes.
We might have to
South
pop
Africa.
Up. We might have to pop up on you all because South Africa is our spot. We love Cape Town. We've been to Durban. We've had an opportunity to do some cities in the South African area, and it's not just all vacation. It's like you said, culture and life and people that are our relatives. Those are our real relatives, and so it's exciting.
Absolutely, yeah. That whole tie. Yeah. I know something you just mentioned about. Some of the challenges that we face in general as African Americans, and how that how people there can relate to it. People in that part of the world can relate to that. And I think our story, our business failure, and how we had to overcome that resonates. Mm-hmm. Because so many times we are viewed as the rich Americans. Sure. And so we do have a different history. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is always a place where we can connect, and what we share in common is that we've had to deal with some of the same challenges. There it was apartheid, colonization, here by another name. Mm-hmm. Segregation and slavery.
Jim Crow, slavery, go all the way back. Jim Crow,
right. And so those are the things that we get to talk about, to share that we have a lot of the same challenges, and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis when you're trying to raise families, and you're trying to, pursue dreams and accomplish things that you see other individuals accomplish. Sure. So it's very similar. So I love that we can. That's always necessary because of the way we're viewed just in general as Americans. So we have to always overcome that. We have to always say, no, we have more in common than you think.
Sure. I love the way you contextualize it because you're dealing with human factors. It's not just a product. It's not just the GDP of a country or anything like that. You're actually talking about kingdom. You're talking about people in the kingdom. Yes. And delve into the story of how you can use something as a failure, because you literally dubbed it a failure. You said, hey, our business failure. Sometimes you look at it from the lens of half empty and somebody thinks half full. You're actually celebrating success from a failure. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a process, but if it's a business failure, or it's a failure in work, if it's a failure in marriage, relationships, whatever that failure might be, we all as human beings are going to have to face things. Sure. And we want to fail forward.
Okay.
All right. We want to take those things, and it's a process to do it. And there's a right way to do it.
Yeah.
And so you learn lessons from those failures. And one distinction is that we may fail at certain things in life, but it doesn't make us a failure.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's the difference. We have to step away from and separate ourselves from the failure. And yes, we have to live through it. And I think that's where I want to be very practical, because it takes time to overcome failures.
Sure.
But in the midst of those failures, can we still enjoy life? And
yeah.
so that's a
Yeah.
lot of
and
what I'm
if
talking about.
we make it a relative perspective, some people's failure is more success than others will ever have in their whole lives. And so
Good.
I love how you embrace the fact that the good life can be lived now. The new opportunities waiting. You can live a good life now. This seems more like a podcast conversation than a radio interview.
Okay.
But for those, but for those who tuning in, Barbara Welch has been around a while talking about finance. You've got a history of banking. You've got entrepreneurship oozing from you and your husband. I would call them Team Welch. Even your kids. It's in them.
Yes,
they're entrepreneurs as well.
Yes.
Coast to coast, literally, and so tell us a little bit about what's the impetus behind that. What drives Barb Welch into wanting to help other people manage money and become financially successful?
I think that that has just always been a part of who I am.
You come from a family of business owners as well.
Well, I do. Actually, I was talking to our son about that this morning, and he had spent some time with some family members not too long ago, and he was just excited about them. They're closer to his age, and they're in business, and I said, yeah, you really, both sides of your family, you have a business, people that were in business. So I would say it's always been around me, and at, different capacities. My mother's family, both my grandmother and grandfather owned their own businesses.
Wow.
They my grandfather was the first master plumber, and probably the only plumber at that time in northern Michigan and Baldwin, Michigan area.
Wow.
And they migrated from the south first to Chicago, East Chicago, and then to northern Michigan in the early 40s, 1940s. So, part of that great migration. And so he was a master plumber. And then he and my grandmother together owned a poultry farm.
Wow.
So my mother grew up on a poultry farm, her and her siblings, and also my grandmother owned a hotel and a restaurant.
So it's just in your blood on both sides.
It is, and she worked really hard.
That's not the Brooks side. Are those Brooks?
That's the Tree side.
Right.
So my mother, yes, it's just a Treese.
So you got Treese and Brooks.
And then Brooks, and then
now Welch.
Right, and now Welch. So he kind of gets it. So yeah, and on the Brooks side, it's so interesting because those, the families. My parents grew up in the same area, so they went to school together.
They knew each other.
So they knew each other since kindergarten.
Well, the world doesn't stand a chance.
You know what I mean? So the families kind of interfaced. So one of my uncles ended up apprenticing under my grandfather, became a plumber, and
awesome.
did very well. And so now his offspring, they're out there in business, and they own construction and security.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've seen the security trucks going around on the Baldwin area.
Yes,
I was like, I know that family. I know those people.
Yeah, so he kind of, you kind of grow up around that. And, my dad was in real estate, and also he was a wonderful musician, jazz musician,
yes.
So that's like
reputable.
That's the stuff that makes life good, that flavors life.
Well, you
beautiful
are
music and food and all that stuff.
You're a walking, talking, living product of what it is that you're preaching. The good life, money mindset, 8 principles. Let's talk a little bit about it, and I want to hear more about the tour as well in Africa, because most people think of Africa as being a world away, when actually it's closer than you think.
Yeah, two 10-hour flights.
2 10-hour flights, but then even the people that we're connected to, we happen to know some people.
Yes, and even our conversation today.
Yeah,
that's so true.
We're only a few degrees separated from connecting with God's people during our time here.
Yes.
You mentioned, well, in the book, you talk about principles for living the good life now. Give us a quick overview, because there's some people who are watching or listening who may not be aware of this valuable resource. And now there's a book coming out to accompany the workshops.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So, the 8 principles spell, and it's actually more appropriately an acronym.
Yes, acronym.
Because
yes.
the word itself has context to the meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But so just very quickly, because my family says you take way too long to go through these principles.
No, this is your time. Go for it. Go for it.
But real quickly, I would say just the G, we'll just spell through it. So the G represents generosity and gratitude, the principles of generosity and gratitude. O is for operate according to a detailed financial plan. The second O is open up to accountability.
Mm-hmm.
D is for discipline.
Mm-hmm.
L is for lifelong learning. I is for invest in you, a very holistic, overall well-being approach to investing in yourself. And F is for freedom. Freedom to live the good life now, overcoming obstacles that may be in your way. And E is for continuing to, over time, examine those good life stealers, I call them.
Wow.
And taking the time to really develop the habits and the behaviors necessary. So neuroscience shows us that it takes 63 days to form a new memory that will that can be referenced and habitualized.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And so that it's important to practice. So we have a lot of information. We have a lot of knowledge. And, I like to, many times when I'm presenting, talking to groups, I like to tell them that I don't need to tell them these things. Right. You know these things. So you've got you've got that working knowledge, some of the technical knowledge, but we don't have the habits and the behaviors.
The memory. I like that. Because we're reminded of what we don't have, and oftentimes minimalize what we do have. I love the fact that your principles are very basic, and they are the first letters of those words, good life. What does it mean to have a good life? We were teasing off air about how you can be wealthy here, but if you go to Africa, you're going to be very wealthy based on the American dollar.
Yes.
But draw the connection between what good life means both with and without money.
Yes, absolutely. So it's what this book is really about. And I'm really excited about the book that will accompany the workbook, which is by the same title, The Good Life Money Mindset.
You did it in reverse. You put the workbook out first, and then
I know it, right?
I love that. I love it. Smart.
Okay.
You'll receive that. Well, no, think about it. You've done workshops, or you're available to do workshops and training around this workbook.
Yes.
Somebody will say, "Well, I want more. Give me philosophy behind it. Give me now the
and I want to hear more about this business family, the story,
Exactly.
hear more about the couple. And some people are going to, they're going to relate more to the stories. It's going to draw them in so that they'll want to learn the information. And the way I tell the story, as you're reading the stories, you're learning.
So they're like anecdotal stories along the way?
Yes, and there's our stories. They're real stories
that's what makes it real
from
good.
our journey.
Yeah.
So, to answer your question, this book, the idea for this book, it was really not, it all started, I was looking for relief from the stress that we were undergoing after our business failed in the mid-90s. And we were attending church. One thing that saved us is that we regularly attended church. And so that spiritual just fortitude, the encouragement and being connected to other believers was just, so important. It was just life-saving. But that particular Sunday, the pastor taught on Ephesians 2:10. And what I got from that, that we are we are masterpieces. We are God's workmanship. And what I walked away from that, very simply, is that we were created to live we were created to do great things.
Sure.
And live a good life. And so that just resonated with me. That was my aha moment. And it did, financially speaking, we were in the same exact place. But what it did for me, spiritually, emotionally, what it did for me was allow me to see my situation in a different perspective.
Okay.
And it gave me permission to begin the journey of enjoying my life. Because we feel like many times we fail because we could of bad decisions.
Yeah,
it can be.
We could have done
surely.
some things different. Hindsight is always 20/20.
Right. I mean, we certainly do. And many times we could have made different decisions, but we feel that we owe ourselves, we owe our friends, we owe society in general to punish ourselves. And so what that scripture did for me was release me, at least to begin the journey,
Sure.
to forgive myself, and to, find my value, my self-worth, my confidence. When you go through something that is that devastating, it decimates your confidence.
Sure.
And so I decided that day life was going to be good. So it's little things, right? It's the little things. It's just your perspective. So you wake up in the morning and it's a beautiful day, and we're going to go for a walk. And we're going to not just have lunch, but we're going to put some flowers on the table.
Sure.
And we're going
enjoy
to enjoy it. And we're going to put a little music on.
Yeah.
Right? Did it cost me anything additional? No.
Make the difference. I think your revelation is worth investigating even deeper, because I was ready to go to church when you started talking about the Ephesians scripture. God is so thorough in the way that he ministers to us. And when people say, oh, it all works together for good, or it's all good, it's good because he orchestrated it to be that way. And it's nothing evil, bad, wicked, dark about serving God. That's the other thing that I can appreciate, because this book could appropriately, or these workshops that you do are and have been and continue to be appropriately disseminated throughout a lot of different genres. I mean, it's not just in the church that we learn how to live the good life.
That's right.
It's people out in the communities, it's people in educational institutions, it's people in manufacturing companies that can benefit from understanding that first principle of gratitude alone is a big one. That's a big one. Just learning how to have gratitude, it seems to level you to a place where you can see forward. Tell us more about that moment you had in church that gave birth to all of this.
Wow. I do share that in the book.
Okay.
Just kind of account that story, recall that story. But it was, like any other Sunday, you get up and you pulling the kids together. They were both infants at that time. You're just going to church, and our frame of mind during that time was, everything was a chore, because you're fighting depression. And so everything is a chore, just, trying to move and be there. So I can just remember, kind of getting them settled in children's church, the nursery, at that time. And then, having our seat, and I don't really remember much else, but when he started talking about Ephesians 2:10 was going to be the context for the message, and I really cannot remember much else
after that.
about his whole
You
message.
had one of those moments, God just took you.
And the way I would, I'm always taking notes in church.
Okay.
So, and I let my mind go a little bit, because I get so many ideas or answers during service, right?
That's
so, when you're a long time churchgoer, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have your different approaches. So
Sure.
I just remember letting that wash over me.
Okay.
What does that mean? And it was just revelatory. And it was like I couldn't wait to just get alone with that.
So you could go and add more to your notes and your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to get alone and just really let that wash over me and what that means for me. And then I was able to, because I really took it very, very seriously, and I needed something. It's so obvious, right? So then I started creating for myself these principles and had the opportunity. At that time, I was just became licensed as a financial advisor. I was working on my master's in financial planning, and I needed a marketing tool. At that time, you had to have a workshop or a presentation to go out and talk to groups about the financial planning services. So I was with a firm, and we didn't have the money at that time you could buy them off the shelf.
Right.
And so I thought, I'm going to take these principles I've been kind of operating, and talking to Scott about and create a workshop.
I love
and
it.
So that's where the Good Life Workshop was born. And then I just, kept.
Who would benefit from this workshop? Let's talk a little bit about that. And then we got to get the Africa tour in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we got to get that in.
Yeah.
This is wonderful for the workforce. So organizations that are looking to offer financial wellness initiatives,
Sure.
Programs for their employees, it's wonderful because this is the foundation for how I begin to work with organizations. So it's based on these principles. We start here, but then I'm able to develop programs that can be customized for my clients.
Sure.
So it's great for the workforce, especially in our current world, working with different generations. Our Gen Zers and even younger. Some of our alphas that might be interning now, and they require and are demanding that the workplace really speaks to their whole person. So they do not
and
want.
This is one of those things that's probably on their list. Yeah.
It takes, yes, and it's a really holistic view to managing your finances and why it's so important that you speak to every aspect of who you are to be successful financially.
Yeah.
And so it does matter. Generosity does matter if you want to be successful financially. And what does that do for you? How it insulates you from greed when you are outward focused versus.
So it's really helping to shape
and
values.
Generosity.
You're shaping values on money and living a good life. In our last few minutes, and thank you for sharing that, because if somebody wants to get this workshop at their workplace, at their church, just in their community group, fraternities, sororities, organizations, you'll benefit from it. It's Barbara Welch. She is the Good Life Money Coach, and the mindset is stemming from these 8 principles of living a good life now. It's more than money. Wealth is not just the dollars in your bank account. But speaking of
very important.
Yeah, very important.
And we're talking about that. I mean, this is very important.
Very.
Yeah.
Speak to the Africa tour that's coming up. People, you can check her out on social media. LinkedIn is definitely a good spot. But what's some other contact information before we get into the Africa trip?
I would say certainly if you have friends, family, or if you're planning to visit, we will be in Johannesburg and Cape Town in South Africa. The first stop is on September 28th.
Okay. And
that information, the contact information, is on the website. Our host, our Bishop Wall Abrams, and his wife, Pastor Diane Abrams, and they are the contact there. So they still print tickets.
Sure.
And so they are distributing them through the host churches. So so that information can be found on my Facebook page, Instagram. I'm at the Good Life Money Coach on Facebook and also on Instagram.
Nice. I'm excited. I'm so godly proud to even know you and Scott. Well, and the kids too. I mean, the whole family. The Welches are blessed. You have a few moments to close us out with any type of inspiration or, maybe even a pitch for people to start following you. This philosophy that you have is godly, and it's definitely good. So I'm going to turn it over to you to close us out.
Thank you so much. It's never enough time, right?
Right.
Yeah,
30 minutes goes by fast.
Yeah, it really does go by fast. But, I really just want to encourage the listeners, the viewers, to make a decision to change the things in your life that are obstacles to you really enjoying your life. We have been blessed with these wondrously and complexly designed brains. And so everything we do starts with a thought. And so if we can change our thinking, then we can change our lives. We can change our families' lives. We can change our community. We can impact the world. It's not a mistake that we think about some of our great leaders in the world and in our history as great minds, because it all starts with a thought. And so I want to encourage you that regardless of where you are, the circumstances you are in, begin to think about them differently. Begin to be positive and quiet the negative thoughts that would try to discourage you from believing that you can be more and have more. You can. It is possible. And I know it. I know it personally. I've seen it in my friends' lives and other people's lives. So I want to encourage you. And like I always say, if you follow me on social media, I always end, if you've been to my workshops or presentations, I always end them by saying, remember, it's your life. Make it good.
I love it. That's a good place for us to close out. Thank you so much, Barb, for being here today. That's Barb Welch, the Good Life Money Coach. The Mindset book is available. You can purchase it online as well. So glad you tuned in today. Thank you for being a part of Community Voices on 91.9 FM, The People's Choice.
You've been listening to Community Voices with your host, Terrence Lachey. Community Voices can be heard every Friday at 12 noon. This radio roundtable features community, business, and religious leaders that discuss current events and topics that impact our urban community. If you would like to be a guest, or if you have a suggested topic, contact the station today at 616-259-7342. Until next week, let your voice be heard in the community.